We are back with Veritas Live, and I'm Demetrius, your host. And today we are diving into the strategies and tools that businesses must use to survive and thrive after a cyber attack. Now, you'll learn that cyber resilience is not just about the technology, but also the response and readiness capabilities of your team. Now, we have Ben Spickert, our community manager, standing by in the chat. So go ahead and post your comments and questions right now. And so my favorite part of live is seeing where everyone is watching from all around the world. So go ahead right now and type that in the chat window. And for the moment that we've all been waiting for, I'd like to introduce our special guest, Sean John, Chief Technology Officer at NCC Group. Welcome to Veritas Live, Sean.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. And I also understand that you have a very unusual hobby. Can you explain that to us this morning?
I don't know if it's unusual or it's particularly for me, but I have a particular interest in classical studies and particularly Roman history. And within that, I'm particularly interested in Roman drainage and sanitation systems and Roman toilets. So I have a large collection of photos of drains and toilets from across the world, and was watching a documentary last night with Mary Beard and got very excited when she went into the Palatine toilets in the Palatine palaces, which I've never seen before, and was sitting on them. And that was a very highlight of my week to watch Mary Beard sitting on a 2,000-year-old toilet. So that's my particular interest. So.
Awesome. And so that reminds me of a US show called Dirty Jobs. I think that's the name of it. I don't know if
Yeah,
you've ever seen it before, but it's pretty good.
I think we have a similar one in Britain as well. I do emphasise that I'm interested in toilets 2,000 years old, where there's anything that's left there is quite dried out, and we're just looking at the history of what's there. Not so, but although I did have learned a lot about cyber sanitation, about sanitation as part of that studying. I wrote a 12,000 word dissertation on Roman sanitation, which has given me some learnings about modern sanitation as well, and even some
Yeah.
parallels to cyber. So.
Awesome. Well, fantastic. And let's dive right in here and talk a little bit about the concept of business and cyber resilience, Sean, and also its importance in today's digital landscape and also the role of cyber recovery. Now, how does resilience differ from the immediate incident response aspect of it?
Do you think about resilience versus incident response and recovery? Whereas historically, it's all been about how can I respond to a threat or an incident and maybe get the technology back up and running.
Mhm.
The more important thing from a resilience perspective is not can I stop attack, not can I detect an attack, although they are both part of it. It's how do I architect my business and my technology in such a way that I can be resilient against an attack or a threat. That, yeah, I can do the detection, I can do the response, but I can also make sure I've got the recovery in place, or I've got the business processes or the technology processes that allow me to continue operating my organization while even undergoing or living through a cyber attack.
Yeah, I love that response because in today's interconnected world, everything is so digital now. The data is the most important aspect. And if you're not taking the precautions to protect that data, make sure that you have a backup copy of it, it's immutable, so you can be ready to recover. It's super important. So I really love that response there. And also, I know you have quite a bit of experience here, but what are some of the most common cyber threats that organizations face today? And also, how do tabletop exercises help in preparing for these threats?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at probably the most high profile type of attacks we see today, it is ransomware
Yeah.
attacks that are looking to either steal data or disrupt access to data, or even just take systems offline and make them unavailable. It's almost like a going through a circle to that's where threats started probably at the beginning, was about interrupting access to systems, and then we've gone through the whole malware, banking Trojan features, which are all still around now. But then with ransomware, that's really came to the fore about 10 years ago and has grown. That really is something that everyone's got to worry about, and they're continuously expanding. And when people pay the ransomware, that feeds the research into the next evolution of it. So I think virtually every organization needs to think about it. There are obviously other pieces of malware and Trojans and distributed denial of service attacks, but I think the ransomware ones, particularly those that have come both criminal gang and nation state oriented, that attack systems and physical environment and key data, that's really raised the profile. And ironically, the first security technology we had to worry about was backup, clustering, data availability, and that's probably the most important thing yet again.
Yeah, I agree with that. Ransomware definitely catches all the headlines. Besides the eclipse from yesterday, I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to grab your glasses and actually take a peek at that eclipse or not. But
Yeah, for me,
ransomware,
unfortunately, I'm too far east. But I
Far
was
East.
hearing all about it. Unfortunately, in London, we were a bit beyond. You had to be on the west of the UK to have a chance of seeing it. But I remember the one in 1999, so I know how exciting it is. And I think it's 20 years before you'll get one again, isn't it? So
It'll be quite some time before the next one. But I think someone mentioned there is another one coming in 2025 around the Great Pyramids of Egypt.
oh
So
wow.
that should be exciting. Maybe I need to go ahead and book my ticket
I
right
know
now.
quite a few people from Britain that went to America to watch this one this week. So
Awesome, awesome. So let's talk about strategy for a moment, Sean. Now, we've all heard about having a strategy around cyber recovery, and typically you have elements like immutability, encryption, zero trust, access controls, multi-factor authentication, and multi-person authorization. Now, how do you design a tabletop exercise that accurately simulates a real-world cyber attack with some of these elements that I just mentioned?
yeah, I mean, this is something we do a lot at NCC Group for our customers. And the key thing is to actually think about the scenarios and the incidents that are appropriate to that customer. So from our perspective, we'll start off with some threat scenario planning. So if you look at some of the regulations and the requirements around resilience, are things like in the UK, the CBEST banking, the CBEST testing that's part of banking, the TIBER in European Union for financial services, and then we have the Digital Operation Resilience Act, DORA, coming down the line. All these things ask for threat-led scenarios. So it's about not just coming up with any old scenario, it's thinking about the organization, the industry, where you work, what sort of systems you have, how you're operated, and then planning out the threats that you could face, thinking through those scenarios, and then in the tabletop and even in technical testing that we might do alongside it. So we quite often do tabletop exercises, but we'll also do threat-led penetration testing for customers, but building that around realistic scenarios that reflect their organization, the business they work in, the vertical, and the technology. The more you can make it realistic and plausible and something that is actually likely to happen, the better. And from the threat point of view, what are the things they need to be thinking about this point in time, not about the last threat they had, the last attack they had, but about what they face today.
Okay, yeah, great. And it also reminds me of just like any other sport. So, like playing golf. So, building that muscle memory, the more that you do something, especially doing it as if you are in a live scenario, you're going to get a lot better at it. And it's also going to ease your mind when that CISO or that CIO is standing over your shoulder asking, "Hey, are the systems up yet?" Right?
Absolutely, you don't want the first time you test your response and recovery plan to be during a live incident. You want to do that in advance. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I was a backup administrator, and I think it was Christmas. I'm not gonna say the year, but and then I'll actually unveil how old I am. But it was Christmas, and a backup system went down. I got paged, and I had to literally jump on my laptop and start figuring out how to recover these systems, and it was so stressful to do it. And I've never recovered that system before, so it took a lot out of me to try to figure out all the DNS, the host names, and all the different systems and all the different backups that were successful. So please use your tabletop exercise. Now, also, Sean, in conducting tabletop exercises, how do you identify, let's say, roles and responsibilities within the team? And also, how important is cross-departmental involvement in these simulations?
Yeah, first, that's something we'll typically plan alongside the customer in terms of thinking about what roles and responsibilities they actually face. So you need to have the technical response, you need maybe the CISO, the legal team. You do need the business decision makers because they will be the ones that ultimately have to decide whether to turn a system off or on again, off if needed, to
Mhm.
disrupt business application. And then you need to think about comms and PR and engagement. Quite often, when it comes to a cyber incident, you can get the technical response and recovery right, but you actually need to be thinking about how you're going to talk to that, both if you're a regulated industry, how you're going to tell the regulators, if you including personal data or personally identifiable information in the US, if you have any notification requirements, if you do need to go and talk to the press, all those things you need to have thought about as part of that tabletop exercise so that you've got the plan in place, you've got the comms plan in place, you've got the recovery plan, and you've got the insight to know what you're going to do.
Yeah, and you can't leave legal out of the situation as well because they have to be intertwined and looped in and ready to go as well because there is an SEC filing. I know on the US side there's a filing that you have to do and you have to fill out an 8K and that's after 4 days you have to really be ready to go. So that's super important.
And if
And
you've
yeah.
got European Union residents data that you've lost and you're sufficiently sized, you'll have to have your data protection officer involved as well.
Okay. Have to have the DPO involved. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. And looks like we have an audience question. So I would like to, let's see, why cyber threats are evolving. How can we adapt our recovery strategies and tabletop exercises to stay ahead of potential attacks?
Yeah, that's about in a way like I was talking about when we do our tabletop exercise with customers. It's about not just having the same old tabletop you do. It's about doing a bit of a threat scan, understanding what the latest threats and techniques and well, basically two techniques and tools, techniques and processes that are being used by attackers, and then thinking from that tabletop exercise how you might actually deal with and respond to that. Quite often, it's good to start from the point of view in a way of even if you have a technical penetration test or a red team test from one of your suppliers like NTC Group. If that comes up with some ways in, maybe that's what you use to build your tabletop exercises around, making sure you're thinking about am I dealing with the latest threats and am I thinking about where I might be vulnerable and then running the tabletop exercises around that.
Okay. Yeah, I love that as well. And let's talk a little bit about some of the latest tools and also the technology that enhances cyber recovery strategy, Sean.
Well, obviously there's the traditional good old backup. I think the ability to be able to share and make data available globally through the cloud, but also, as you were talking about at the beginning, Demetrius, the immutable
Mhm.
storage potential is really important. Also, making sure as you go into cloud systems that you've got the ability to do auto recovery, to do failover, to be able to segment and isolate solutions as you go. And then thinking about key things like if you've got software and software code, do you have that in escrow so that you can pull that back in the event of an issue? Do you have your key core data backed up or in an offline immutable backup that you can recover? Have you tested it? Have you got things like full metal backup, bare metal backup for things like Active
Mhm.
Directory so that you can actually get that back, or ideally moving away from Active Directory to the cloud-based identity solutions so that you're less reliant on a system. But it's all those elements together and it's connecting them. And obviously, when it comes to backup and resilience and infrastructure software, making sure that you have really strong architectures and configurations around that and
Yeah.
anti-malware where appropriate to stop your backups getting infected.
Yeah, and you mentioned Active Directory. That's a huge one because that's the database type format or system that has the keys to the kingdom. So if they get access to Active Directory, typically they can move laterally pretty easily throughout the network and live on the land, right? You're talking anywhere up to 200 and something plus days before they actually find out that someone has been inside and is still inside of the network. So that's actually a huge one.
It's why if you can move to Entra as your primary identity, if you're a
Yeah.
Microsoft shop, and have Active Directory as the backup for legacy systems, and use Entra as much as possible, you're in a better place because you've got better identity protection and you don't have some of those resilience issues with Active Directory, which is after all a 25-year-old old technology. So
Yeah, it is. It is. And it looks like we have another audience question. So I appreciate you typing your questions into the chat there. And this one is, let's see, what trends do you see emerging in cyber recovery?
I think the key one is the one that we were talking about at the beginning, that move towards resilience. So it's about how do you have proactive response detection and then the ability to recover, but also then to learn the lessons from that recovery in order to be able to continue working. And how do you actually build things in such a way that you can make sure that your entire environment is resilient while doing the recovery where you need. So that's why things like zero trust are so important, by the way, because they help to limit the blast area of any attack. The other thing, of course, in a resilience point of view, isn't just technology; it's about resilience of your people. If you have a large ongoing cyber attack, the reality is that that could take months, and then you've got to worry about burnout of your
Yeah.
team. So making sure you've got the appropriate external support that you need, that you can call upon to help augment your own team and provide that rest and recovery and wellness for what can be a very stressful period.
Yeah. And do you see artificial intelligence playing a role here at all?
I think so. I'll probably go more machine learning, but yes, if you're calling machine learning part of artificial intelligence, I mean, I
They are
think that's a
sisters and
key.
brothers now.
That's a key part of the detection and response now. It needs to be built in, but also then if you think about as we start emerging with large language models, it's possible that you could start modeling some of that recovery, doing some of those exercises with those as we go forward. But for now, I think definitely using machine learning, automation, where appropriate, large language models all about augmenting your human beings that are involved and allowing there to be less of the busy work and more of the response and recovery so that people do avoid burnout in a security operations center or in a recovery team, and that they can use that tooling to help put automatic recovery in place. I mean, you already see it in the detection and response capability in a
Mhm.
case of actually let's use machine learning to try and recognize and block an attack before it even gets a chance to get in, or again limit how far it can get through the organization.
Yeah, and burnout is a real thing. There were tons of articles about burnout when some of the previous attacks that happened, and they were working 20, 30, 40 plus hours in just, a couple of days. And so that is a real thing. And also maybe some final closing words from you here, Sean.
Yeah, for me, I think the important thing is to plan ahead. So the resilience comes from thinking about your business, thinking about what the key systems and key operations you are, thinking about the technology that supports it, and make sure that you've planned ahead. So you've got the data resilience in place, you've got the system protection in place, you've got any software or anything that you require in escrow, but also that you've got the plan around the people and who's going to be involved. The more you can do up front and be prepared across your entire cyber resilience and building that into your business resilience as a whole, the better. And then also, once you've done it, don't just leave it as a static bit of paper on the table, on the shelf. Make sure that you're constantly updating it, constantly reviewing it, and ensuring that you're prepared for whatever's happening as threats evolve.
Well, awesome, Sean. Thank you for your great insights. And everyone, be sure to check out the blog post from our very own CISO, Christos Tulumba, on enhancing cyber resilience through integration with SecOps. And also like and subscribe to the Veritas Cyber Resiliency newsletter so you don't miss out on great insights like the ones we've discussed right here in this episode. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in, and be sure to stay secure and back up often.